The remains of Germanwings Flight 9525 cling to an alpine mountainside. Thousands of pieces of the plane are scattered across a remote stretch of the French Alps. These fragments are all that's left of an Airbus A320 carrying 150 people. Recovery teams scrambled to the area have recovered the flight's black box recorder. It will provide vital information. It will explain what happened to the plane and why her passengers never made it to their destination. The search and rescue teams have been told already that their job will be long and difficult. And they've been warned that their mission is likely to be a recovery operation.
We were given precise coordinates, but we could only see some small debris at first. But from afar it is hard to actually see the place of impact. We kept looking and we began seeing thousands of small fragments. We tried looking for some sign of survivors, but it was impossible to see anything that could have survived. Impossible.
None of the passengers or crew on board are likely to have survived. A hiker who returned from the scene reported one of utter devastation.
There is nothing to see anymore. You can see practically nothing. There is debris, of course. There are no pieces anymore. There is nothing. Nothing. The plane has totally disappeared.
This is the Germanwings Airbus A320 filmed in 2014. On today's doomed flight, there were 144 passengers and 6 crew members.
We are in mourning. I wanted to confirm that all means necessary are being put into place to find out the circumstances behind this accident and recover the victims. The accident took place in a very difficult area to access, and it will take several hours for the emergency services to arrive on the scene. I want to thank all the emergency services and civil protection authorities that are deploying, including the gendarmerie, the army and administrative units. To get there as quickly as possible, several ministers are en route.
It set off from Barcelona in Spain this morning at 9:01 GMT. It was expected to reach Düsseldorf in Germany nearly 2 hours later. The Airbus 320 reached 38,000 feet before it started descending, and then it lost contact with air traffic control at around 6,000 feet over the French Alps, less than an hour into the flight. It's thought to have come down somewhere between Digne-les-Bains and Barcelonnette.
My thoughts and my condolences, those of the entire German government, are for those who lost their lives so suddenly. Among them also many compatriots. The suffering of their families right now is beyond measure. We do everything to ensure they have access to all the support and help that is possible at such a time.
The plane lost altitude at an alarming speed, 30,000 feet in less than 8 minutes. Flight tracker radar shows it climbed steadily over the Mediterranean after takeoff, and within half an hour it had reached 38,000 feet. But almost as soon as it had got to cruising altitude, it began to drop rapidly. French officials say no distress call was made.
There have been 6,600 odd of this aircraft type built in the 25 odd years that Airbus have been building them. They don't crash in the cruise. This aircraft was cruising at a typical cruising rate. It could have been anything in excess of 450 knots. And for it to fall out the sky at such a rapid rate of descent is unprecedented. So I'm starting to think, well, and as all analysts are starting to think, well, engine failure is one thing, but then it would have continued for some time. Of course, these aircraft are designed to glide some distance as well, and it's unusual that you would get failure of both engines. In fact, one engine failure is almost completely rare.
The tragedy is spread across Europe. Hearts ache for lives lost in Spain and here in Germany. 16 children from this high school were on their way home to be reunited with their waiting families. They'd been away for a week in Spain on a language exchange program. The children were barely teenagers, most just 15 years old.
I would like to say at first that the town is deeply shaken. We're in a state of shock. It's the worst thing imaginable. The relatives are being cared for by specialists, by spiritual advisors and psychologists. We are all with the relatives and the victims with all our thoughts. First, the relatives heard the news in the media and did some research themselves. And then when the plane didn't land and they were unable to make contact with their friends and classmates by cell phone, that's when they assumed the worst. So some of the parents drove to Dusseldorf, some came to the school.
This is the crisis centre in Dusseldorf where some of the anguished parents came. There's another one in Berlin too. Two of the first victims to be named are German opera stars. Maria Radner was returning home with her husband and baby. On the same flight, bass baritone Oleg Briac. In France, the emergency centre was visited by President Hollande and Spain's King Philippe. The monarch is here on an official visit, but has now cancelled his trip to return home to deal with the tragedy.
Que hemos tenido conocimiento de este terrible accidente.
In the first place, I'd like to say we've heard about this awful accident that took place this morning on French territory in the south of the country in the Alps. A plane from Barcelona crashed, and we know that there are many victims, and we don't know whether there are survivors. Amongst the victims there are a high number of Spanish nationals alongside Germans, and also Turks. In the first place, I'd like to express on behalf of the Queen and President Hollande and myself my profound condolences from the bottom of my heart to the families who've lost loved ones. I'd like to transmit our pain to the German and Turkish authorities for their dead. And I would like to also express to the French authorities, the French President and the Prime Minister our gratitude for all the measures they've immediately put in action. The operation to attend to this catastrophe, as we know, is very complicated because of the location where it took place.
Y también quisiéramos transmitir a las autoridades francesas, al presidente Hollande, al primer ministro.
It's believed some 45 passengers on board the Germanwings plane were Spanish. Arrangements are now being made to take their relatives to France, to the crash site, even though French investigators say it could be days before the bodies of the victims are found and retrieved.
What more can I say at the moment? Well, all I can tell you is that obviously I'm very sad, as many are, about this very dramatic accident. We are going to do everything we can within our powers, in our hands, to help, anything that is possible to help the families, to give them our support.
The Airbus A320 has a strong safety record, but that will now be under further scrutiny. It's been in operation since 1988. That's 27 years in the sky. Over that time, the aircraft has carried some 6 billion passengers. That's around 86% of the world's population. It's a short to medium-range commercial airliner, meaning it doesn't fly long haul, and there are currently 6,157 of them in operation, with one taking off or landing somewhere in the world every 2 seconds, every day. The A320 typically carries around 150 passengers, though it can fit up to 180 depending on the layout. It's not only used by Germanwings, which is part of Lufthansa, but also by many airlines including British Airways, EasyJet and Air France. The A320 has a strong safety record, although there have been 11 previous crashes that resulted in loss of life. 162 people were killed when Air Asia Flight 8501 crashed into the Java Sea in Indonesia over Christmas. The cause of that is still under investigation. And the plane that was guided into the Hudson River in New York by its pilot when its engines failed in 2009 was also an A320.
Everyone at Lufthansa and Germanwings is currently deeply shocked and saddened by these events. There's not too much of information that I can give to you right now, but please be assured that for Lufthansa it's of greatest importance to now focus on the investigation of this accident. It's now the most important thing to get the information to the relatives and friends, and that is our main focus as well, to support them all wherever they are and whichever nationality they have.
The crash site has been described as a horror scene. Nothing of the plane remains intact, its fuselage ripped and shredded. All indications suggest everyone on board has been killed. But rescue teams will stay on the mountainside tonight to resume a difficult, painstaking task in the morning. They will do everything in their power to answer the many, many prayers being offered across Europe. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.